Part 1. Maid's daughter blew bubbles to calm a boy in crisis. What his billionaire dad saw changed everything. The scream echoed across the grand lobby of the Carter Grand Hotel, freezing hundreds of guests in place. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. A fountain flowed quietly in the center of the room. Yet all anyone could hear was the desperate cry of an 8-year-old boy curled on the marble floor. Noah Carter, the only son of billionaire Ethan Carter, pressed both hands tightly against his ears. His breathing came in sharp bursts. His eyes were squeezed shut. Around him, security guards formed a nervous circle. A private doctor crouched nearby, speaking softly, but Noah only grew more distressed. Every voice, every footstep, every ringing phone seemed to crash into him like waves during a storm. From the second-floor balcony, Ethan Carter stood motionless. He had built one of the largest technology companies in America. He negotiated billion-dollar deals without hesitation. Yet nothing in his success had taught him how to help his son. "Give him space," the doctor said. "Reduce the stimulation." But the lobby was full. Tourists whispered. Employees exchanged worried looks. The noise never stopped. Near the employee entrance, Grace Miller pushed a housekeeping cart after finishing a long shift. Beside her sat her 10-year-old daughter, Sophie, waiting patiently with a backpack on her lap. Sophie watched the scene carefully. Unlike everyone else, she did not look frightened. She looked concerned. "Mom," she whispered. "The room is getting louder for him." Grace sighed. "Do not stare, sweetheart. That is Mr. Carter's son. This is not our business." Sophie nodded, but her eyes remained fixed on Noah. She noticed the way his shoulders trembled. She noticed how he flinched whenever someone spoke. Most importantly, she noticed something nobody else seemed to understand. Noah was not misbehaving. He was overwhelmed. Before Grace could stop her, Sophie stood up. She walked calmly across the lobby. One security guard stepped forward. "Miss, you need to stay back." Sophie simply smiled and walked around him. She stopped several feet away from Noah. Instead of speaking, she sat cross-legged on the floor. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small yellow bottle. Several guests exchanged confused glances. Ethan frowned from above. Sophie dipped the wand into the solution and gently blew. A single bubble floated into the air. Then another. Then 10 more. The colorful spheres drifted slowly through the sunlight pouring in from the glass ceiling. One floated near Noah's face. His scream stopped. The entire lobby seemed to stop breathing with him. Noah opened his eyes. He watched a bubble rise toward the chandelier. Another landed softly on his sleeve before disappearing. His hands slowly lowered from his ears. Sophie blew another stream of bubbles. "Blue," she whispered. Noah blinked. "Blue," he repeated quietly. It was the first word anyone had heard him speak in weeks. Ethan gripped the balcony railing. Security guards stared in disbelief. The doctor lowered his clipboard. Noah sat upright, following the bubbles with his eyes. For the first time all afternoon, peace settled over the lobby. Sophie smiled gently. "Blue means there is room to breathe," she said. Noah looked directly at her. Then something unexpected happened. He smiled back. Far above them, Ethan Carter felt something he had not felt in years. Hope. Sometimes the strongest person in the room is not the richest, the loudest, or the most powerful. Sometimes it is the one who chooses to understand. A small act of kindness can succeed where money and authority fail. But neither Sophie nor Ethan realized that this single moment was about to uncover a secret that had been hidden inside Noah's heart for years. Part 2. That night, when Noah drew a mysterious woman no one recognized, Ethan Carter discovered a clue that would change everything he thought he knew about his son. The image would not leave Ethan's mind. Long after the lobby had emptied and the guests had returned to their rooms, he sat alone inside his penthouse office overlooking the city lights. In front of him lay a simple sheet of paper given to him by Noah's nanny just before bedtime. Noah rarely drew people. Most of his sketches were shapes, colors, and patterns. But tonight was different. In the center of the page stood a smiling woman with long brown hair. Beside her stood Noah, holding a bright blue balloon. Across the top, written in shaky letters, were 4 words. She promised she would return. Ethan stared at the drawing. His pulse quickened. The woman was not Noah's late mother. It was not a teacher. It was not a relative. He had never seen her before. The next morning, a black SUV stopped outside the small apartment building where Grace and Sophie lived. Grace nearly dropped her coffee when she looked out the window. Ethan Carter himself stepped out of the vehicle. 10 minutes later, he sat awkwardly at their tiny kitchen table. The billionaire looked strangely uncomfortable, surrounded by mismatched chairs and family photographs. Sophie sat across from him, quietly eating cereal. Ethan placed Noah's drawing on the table. "Do you know who this is?" he asked. Sophie studied the picture. Her eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "No," she answered honestly. "But Noah misses her." Ethan leaned forward. "How can you tell?" Sophie pointed to the blue balloon. "Because he drew himself smiling. People only draw happy memories when they are afraid they might lose them." Ethan felt something tighten inside his chest. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. A sharp female voice came through the speaker. "Ethan, tell me you are not wasting your morning with those people." Sophie glanced toward the phone. Grace immediately lowered her eyes. "Vanessa Hart, Ethan's fiancée." Vanessa continued without waiting for an answer. "You have investors arriving this afternoon. The board is already concerned about Noah. The last thing you need is becoming attached to a maid and her child." Sophie looked down at her cereal bowl. Grace's face turned red with embarrassment. Ethan's expression hardened. "I will call you later," he said before ending the call. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Finally, Sophie spoke. "She does not like Noah very much, does she?" Ethan looked shocked. "Why would you say that?" Sophie shrugged. "Because when people love someone, they talk about helping them. She talks about hiding him." The words landed harder than Ethan expected. Later that afternoon, Ethan invited Grace and Sophie to visit the Carter estate. The mansion sat on dozens of acres outside the city, surrounded by gates and manicured gardens. It looked impressive, but Sophie noticed something immediately. It felt lonely. Inside, Noah sat alone in a sunroom overlooking the lake. He was drawing quietly. When Sophie entered, he froze. Everyone held their breath. Then Noah did something that surprised every adult in the room. He stood up, walked past his father, and sat directly beside Sophie. Vanessa, watching from the doorway, looked horrified. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "She is just a housekeeping employee's daughter." Noah suddenly looked up. For the first time in months, he spoke without hesitation. "She listens." The room fell silent. Ethan could barely believe what he had heard. Vanessa turned away in frustration. But Sophie noticed something else. As Noah continued drawing, he carefully added another picture of the mysterious woman. Then he whispered 6 words that made Ethan's blood run cold. She said she would come back. Part 3. When Sophie discovered a hidden letter tucked inside Noah's favorite sketchbook, she realized the mysterious woman had never abandoned him at all. The discovery happened 3 days later on a quiet afternoon at the Carter estate. Rain tapped gently against the windows while Noah sat at the dining table coloring a picture of a lighthouse. Sophie sat across from him doing her homework. For the first time since they met, Noah seemed relaxed. He still spoke rarely, but he no longer looked trapped inside himself. Grace was helping organize household schedules in the kitchen while Ethan worked from home nearby. Even the mansion felt different. Warmer, softer, less like a museum and more like a home. As Noah searched through his sketchbook for a blank page, several drawings slipped onto the floor. Sophie bent down to help gather them. That was when she noticed something unusual. A folded envelope was hidden inside the back cover. It was old and slightly worn, as if it had been opened many times. Noah immediately reached for it. "Mine," he whispered. Sophie nodded gently. "Okay." But Noah surprised her. Instead of taking it away, he placed it carefully in her hands. Then he pointed toward the drawing of the mysterious woman. "Emily," he said. Sophie stared at him. It was the first time he had spoken her name aloud. Slowly, she unfolded the letter. The handwriting was neat and elegant. "Dear Noah, if you are reading this, it means I had to leave before I could say goodbye. Please remember something very important. I did not leave because of you. I could never leave because of you. You are brave, kind, and special exactly as you are. One day I promise you will understand why I had to go. Until then, keep drawing, keep smiling, and never stop believing that someone loves you. Love always, Emily." Sophie's eyes widened. This was not the letter of someone who abandoned a child. This was the letter of someone forced to leave. At that exact moment, Ethan entered the room carrying a laptop. He noticed the paper in Sophie's hands. The moment he saw the signature, the color drained from his face. "Emily," he whispered. Noah nodded. Ethan slowly sat down. Memories rushed back. Emily Turner. a young caregiver hired years earlier. She had been the only person Noah trusted after his mother's passing. Then one day she was suddenly gone. Ethan had been traveling constantly during that period. Vanessa had handled most household matters while he focused on expanding Carter Global. "Where did you get that?" Ethan asked quietly. Noah pointed to his sketchbook. Ethan carefully read every word. His confusion grew with each line. None of this matched what he had been told. Vanessa had claimed Emily quit without warning after accepting another position. Yet this letter told a completely different story. Sophie watched Ethan closely. She wanted him to know she did not choose to leave, Sophie said. Ethan stared at the page. "Then why was I told something else?" Across the room, Noah picked up a blue crayon and began drawing again. This time Sophie noticed something she had missed before. Every picture of Emily included the same object, a silver key hanging around her neck. Noah finished the drawing and pushed it toward Sophie. On the back, he carefully wrote 3 shaky words. She hid something. Ethan's heart began to race. A missing caregiver. A farewell letter. A hidden secret. Suddenly, this was no longer just a childhood memory. Someone had been lying for years. And as Ethan looked at the drawing one more time, he realized there was only one person in the house who might know exactly what happened to Emily Turner. Part 4. When Ethan finally confronted Vanessa about Emily, her reaction revealed a truth far more shocking than anyone expected. The confrontation took place that evening in the library of the Carter estate. Rain tapped softly against the tall windows while Ethan sat at the long oak table with Noah's drawings spread before him. Sophie sat quietly nearby. Grace stood beside the doorway. Vanessa entered carrying a glass of sparkling water, her expression calm and confident. She looked nothing like someone hiding a secret. Ethan slid Emily's letter across the table. "I want to talk about her," he said. Vanessa glanced down at the page. Not a single muscle moved in her face. "Emily Turner?" she asked. "The caregiver who left years ago?" Ethan nodded. "The letter says she did not choose to leave." Vanessa calmly set her glass down. "People rewrite history when they feel guilty." Her answer sounded reasonable, almost convincing. Sophie frowned. Unlike Ethan, she was not listening to Vanessa's words. She was watching her eyes. Ethan picked up Noah's newest drawing and placed it beside the letter. Emily stood beneath a large willow tree wearing the silver key around her neck. The same key Noah had drawn repeatedly for years. Vanessa barely looked at the picture before speaking. "That key again." The room went silent. Sophie immediately looked up. Ethan narrowed his eyes. "What key?" he asked. Vanessa froze for half a second. Only half a second. But Sophie noticed. Vanessa recovered quickly. "The silver key Emily used to wear." Ethan stared at her. "How do you know that?" Vanessa forced a small laugh. "Everyone knew she wore a key." Sophie slowly shook her head. "No, they did not." Vanessa looked toward the little girl. Sophie pointed at the drawing. "Nobody told us it was silver. Noah never said it. Emily never said it. The picture is black and white." Ethan looked down. Sophie was right. The sketch contained no colors. Yet Vanessa had immediately identified the key. For the first time, uncertainty appeared on Ethan's face. Vanessa crossed her arms. "This is absurd. You are taking detective lessons from a 10-year-old. Sophie remained calm. "Grandma used to say people tell the truth before they realize they are talking." Vanessa's expression hardened. Ethan leaned back in his chair. His mind was racing. For years he had trusted Vanessa completely. Now a child had noticed something he missed. Before anyone could continue, Noah quietly slid another drawing across the table. This one showed Emily standing beside a small cottage near a lake. Above the roof, he had carefully written 2 words. Willow Creek. Ethan looked at the picture. "What is Willow Creek?" Noah tapped the page. "Emily." Vanessa immediately stood up. Too quickly. Her chair scraped loudly across the hardwood floor. "This has gone far enough," she snapped. "You are encouraging fantasies." Ethan slowly rose to his feet. "Then why are you nervous?" Vanessa looked away. For the first time since the conversation began, she had no answer. The silence stretched across the room. Finally, she grabbed her purse and headed toward the door. Just before leaving, she turned back. Some memories are better left buried. Then she walked out. Sophie stared after her. Ethan stared at the drawing. Noah stared at the willow tree. Deep inside, all 3 of them understood the same thing. Vanessa had not proven her innocence. She had revealed exactly where they needed to look next. And somewhere near a place called Willow Creek, The truth about Emily Turner was waiting to be found. Part 5. Vanessa had not proven her innocence. She had revealed exactly where they needed to look next. And somewhere near a place called Willow Creek, the truth about Emily Turner was waiting to be found. Ethan left before sunrise the next morning. He did not bring lawyers. He did not bring assistants. He did not even tell Vanessa where he was going. For the first time in years, the billionaire was not chasing a business deal. He was chasing the truth. Sophie sat in the passenger seat beside him while Grace and Noah remained at the estate. The drive to Willow Creek took nearly 3 hours. Along the way, Sophie studied Noah's drawings again. Every picture contained the same 3 details: the willow tree, the lake, the silver key. He was leaving clues, Sophie said quietly. Ethan glanced at her. Why? Sophie looked out the window. Because he was afraid nobody would listen if he used words. The answer hit Ethan harder than he expected. When they arrived in Willow Creek, they found a small lakeside community center matching the building Noah had drawn. The manager, an elderly woman named Martha Jenkins, recognized Emily's photograph immediately. Of course I know her, Martha said. She volunteers here every week. Ethan's heart raced. Can you call her? Martha hesitated. Before I do, there is something you should see. She disappeared into a storage room and returned carrying a large cardboard box. Inside were dozens of drawings. Hundreds of them, actually. Every single one was signed with Noah's name. Ethan stared in disbelief. Emily had kept every drawing Noah ever gave her. Martha smiled sadly. She never stopped talking about that boy. Ethan felt his throat tighten, but he still needed proof. Real proof. Not feelings. Not assumptions. That afternoon, Martha introduced Ethan to 3 former employees from the Carter estate who had retired to the area. One was a former driver. Another had worked in administration. The third had been the estate manager years earlier. Ethan interviewed them separately. To his shock, their stories matched perfectly. 5 years ago, Vanessa had personally arranged meetings with Emily. Vanessa had offered money. Vanessa had warned Emily that remaining close to Noah would create conflict. Vanessa had insisted that Noah needed to become independent. None of them knew every detail, but all 3 confirmed the same thing. Emily had not wanted to leave. Ethan sat silently in his rental car afterward. The evidence was undeniable. Sophie watched him from the passenger seat. You believe the wrong person, she said gently. Ethan nodded. I know. Sophie looked down at Noah's latest drawing. The important thing is that you are listening now. That evening, Martha finally called Emily. She agreed to meet. As the sun began to set over Willow Creek Lake, Ethan saw her walking toward them along the water's edge. She looked older, wiser, but instantly recognizable. Emily stopped a few feet away. Neither of them spoke at first. Then Ethan held out one of Noah's drawings. He never forgot you, he said. Tears filled Emily's eyes. I never forgot him either. For the first time in 5 years, the truth stood face to face with the people it had hurt. But neither Ethan nor Emily realized that back at the Carter estate, Vanessa had just discovered where they were, and she was already planning one final move to stop the truth from reaching Noah. Part 6. For the first time in 5 years, the truth stood face to face with the people it had hurt. But neither Ethan nor Emily realized that back at the Carter estate, Vanessa had just discovered where they were, and she was already planning one final move to stop the truth from reaching Noah. Emily returned to the Carter estate 2 days later. The reunion everyone had imagined for years should have been joyful. Instead, tension hung over the mansion like a storm cloud. Ethan wanted Noah to hear the truth directly from Emily. Noah deserved that much. Sophie sat beside him in the sunroom, while Grace prepared tea for everyone. Emily looked nervous. Not because she feared Noah. She feared reopening old wounds. Slowly, she sat across from him. I need you to know something, she said. Noah looked up from his sketchbook. Emily took a deep breath. I never stopped caring about you. Not for one day. Noah listened quietly. Then he asked the question that had lived inside him for years. Why did you leave? Emily's eyes filled with tears. Before she could answer, the front doors opened. Vanessa walked into the room unannounced. Everyone froze. Ethan immediately stood up. You should not be here. Vanessa ignored him. She looked directly at Noah. There is more to the story than they are telling you. Sophie felt her stomach tighten. Something was wrong. Vanessa continued. Emily made her own choices. Nobody forced her. Emily slowly stood. That is not true. For several minutes. The room became a battlefield of competing versions of the past. Yet something unexpected happened. Noah did not panic. He did not shut down. He simply listened. Then Sophie noticed him drawing. While the adults argued, Noah was sketching quietly. He drew a lake, a willow tree, a silver key. Then he added something new, a bridge connecting two sides of the page. Sophie stared at the picture. Suddenly she understood. Noah was tired of adults fighting over the past. He wanted connection, not conflict. She gently placed her hand on the table. Everyone stopped. The room fell silent. Even Ethan listened. Sophie pointed to Noah's drawing. Look at the bridge. Emily leaned forward. Vanessa frowned. Noah finally spoke. I do not care who was right. Everyone looked at him. I care who stayed. The words struck the room like lightning. Emily began to cry softly. Ethan lowered his eyes. Even Vanessa seemed shaken. Noah turned toward his father. Emily left because adults made mistakes. Then he looked at Emily. But you kept my drawings. Finally, he looked at Sophie. And Sophie helped me find the truth. In that moment, nobody could argue anymore. The truth had already won. Not because of evidence. Because Noah finally understood he had always been loved. Later that evening, Ethan walked through the estate gardens with Sophie. You solved this, he said. Sophie shook her head. Noah solved it. Ethan smiled. Maybe, but you helped him find his voice. As they approached the house, they noticed Noah standing by a window watching the sunset. For the first time in years, he looked peaceful. Yet the biggest test still lay ahead. In 3 weeks, Ethan would host the Carter Foundation Gala. Hundreds of influential guests would attend. And Vanessa had just announced that she planned to be there as well. Part 7. In 3 weeks, Ethan would host the Carter Foundation Gala. Hundreds of influential guests would attend. And Vanessa had just announced that she planned to be there as well. The evening of the gala arrived beneath a sky filled with golden sunset colors. The ballroom of the Carter Grand Hotel sparkled, with crystal chandeliers and elegant decorations. Business leaders, journalists, donors, and community partners filled the room. For Ethan, this event was no longer about business. It was about celebrating the creation of a foundation designed to help children like Noah. Sophie walked beside Grace through the crowded ballroom. Grace wore a simple navy blue dress she had purchased specifically for the event. She felt nervous. Despite everything that had happened, part of her still felt like she did not belong among wealthy executives and famous guests. Sophie squeezed her hand. You belong wherever people are doing good things, she whispered. Grace smiled. Across the room, Noah stood beside Emily, looking more confident than anyone had ever seen him. Ethan watched proudly. Then the atmosphere changed. Vanessa entered the ballroom. Conversations immediately softened. She walked with the same confidence she always carried, as though nothing had happened. Several guests greeted her politely. Others looked uncomfortable. Vanessa scanned the room until her eyes landed on Grace and Sophie. Slowly, she approached them. Sophie immediately sensed trouble. Vanessa smiled, but there was no warmth behind it. What an interesting evening, she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. A housekeeping employee sitting beside company executives. Times certainly have changed. A few people exchanged awkward glances. Grace lowered her eyes. Sophie felt her stomach tighten. Vanessa continued. I suppose this is what happens when wealthy families confuse gratitude with qualifications. More guests turned to look. The room grew uncomfortably quiet. Grace's cheeks burned with embarrassment. Years of being judged because of her job suddenly came rushing back. Sophie could see the hurt in her mother's eyes. That hurt her more than any insult directed at herself. Vanessa was not finished. She looked around the room and smiled. Some people clean rooms, she said. Some people belong in them. The words landed like a slap across the entire ballroom. Several guests looked shocked. Others stared at the floor. Nobody knew what to say. Then a small voice broke the silence. She is a better person than you. Every head turned. Noah stood a few feet away. His hands trembled slightly, but his eyes remained locked on Vanessa. The ballroom became completely silent. Ethan froze. Emily covered her mouth. Sophie stared in disbelief. Noah slowly stepped forward. For years he had hidden from crowds. For years he had struggled to speak in public. Yet now he stood before hundreds of strangers. Grace helped people every day, Noah said. Sophie helped me when nobody else could. Vanessa attempted to interrupt. Noah did not stop. You had money. They had kindness. Several guests nodded quietly. Noah pointed toward Sophie. When I was scared, she stayed. Then he looked at Grace. When people ignored me, she listened. Finally, he looked directly at Vanessa. If you think they are less important because of their jobs, then you do not understand what makes someone valuable. The room erupted into applause. Not polite applause. Genuine applause. Grace began to cry. Sophie hugged her tightly. Ethan felt his eyes fill with emotion. The little boy who once hid on the floor of a hotel lobby was now standing in front of hundreds of people defending the people he loved. Vanessa looked around the room and realized she was completely alone. For the first time, nobody agreed with her. Nobody defended her. Nobody even looked at her. As she quietly walked away, Ethan turned toward Noah with pride. But Noah was not finished. Because before the night ended, he was about to reveal a forgotten promise that would force Ethan to confront the greatest regret of his entire life. Part 8. But Noah was not finished. Because before the night ended, he was about to reveal a forgotten promise that would force Ethan to confront the greatest regret of his entire life. The applause slowly faded across the ballroom. Guests returned to their seats, but the atmosphere had changed. Nobody was talking about business anymore. They were talking about Noah. The boy who had once struggled to speak in crowded rooms had just defended Sophie and Grace in front of hundreds of people. Ethan stood frozen with pride and disbelief. Then Noah quietly reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The paper looked old and worn from years of being opened and closed. Noah walked directly toward his father. "I kept this," he said softly. Ethan accepted the paper. The moment he unfolded it, his heart nearly stopped. It was a note written in his own handwriting years ago. The paper had yellowed with age, but the words remained clear. Noah had carried it for years. Ethan slowly read the final sentence aloud. "Daddy will always listen." The ballroom became silent again. Noah looked at the floor. "I believed you." The words were not angry. That made them hurt even more. Ethan felt every mistake of the past 5 years crash into him at once. The meetings, the flights, the endless excuses. Every moment he told himself he was building a better future for his son while missing the moments that mattered most. "Noah," Ethan began, but Noah gently shook his head. "I kept talking." His voice trembled. "You stopped listening." Several guests quietly wiped tears from their eyes. Grace held Sophie's hand. Emily looked away as emotion overwhelmed her. For a long moment Ethan could not speak. Then he slowly knelt in front of his son. Not because cameras were watching. Not because people expected it. Because it was the only honest thing he could do. "You are right," he whispered. "I stopped listening." Noah looked into his father's eyes. For years he had waited to hear those words. Sophie watched the moment unfold. She knew this was the real turning point of the story. Not Emily. Not Vanessa. Not the foundation. This. A father finally telling the truth. Later that night, after the gala ended, the Carter family gathered in a quiet room overlooking the city skyline. Noah sat at a table drawing while everyone shared desserts and talked. For the first time, nobody was rushing anywhere. No phones. No meetings. No distractions. Just people being together. Suddenly Noah slid a drawing across the table. Everyone leaned closer. The picture showed Noah, Sophie, Grace, Emily, and a bright blue sky filled with floating bubbles. Ethan immediately noticed something missing. He was not in the drawing. His heart sank. "Where am I?" he asked gently. Noah pointed to a large empty space in the center of the picture. "There." Ethan frowned. "Why is it empty?" Noah stared at the drawing for several seconds before answering. The room became completely still. "Because I kept waiting." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The words hit harder than anything Ethan had ever heard. Sophie lowered her eyes. Emily quietly wiped away tears. Grace felt her throat tighten. Ethan looked at the empty space in the picture and suddenly understood everything. Noah had never wanted expensive gifts. He had never wanted a bigger house. He had never wanted more things. He had simply wanted his father. The empty space was not a punishment. It was hope. It was a place Noah had left open because he never stopped believing his father might come back. Slowly, Noah picked up a blue crayon and placed it into Ethan's hand. "You can finish it now." Ethan looked at the drawing, then at his son. Tears finally rolled down his face. Because for the first time in years, he realized the space was still empty, and that meant he still had a chance to fill it. Part 9. The way Ethan chose to fill that empty space would become the most powerful lesson Noah, Sophie, and everyone at the Carter estate would ever learn. 6 months later, almost everything had changed. The Carter estate no longer felt cold and silent. The mansion that once echoed with loneliness now felt alive. Family dinners happened every evening. Phones stayed off during meals. Laughter drifted through hallways that had once felt empty. Ethan kept the unfinished drawing Noah had given him on the wall of his home office. Every morning it reminded him of the space he nearly left empty forever. And every evening it reminded him to go home. Noah had changed too. He still carried his sketchbook everywhere, but the drawings were different now. The lonely figures and empty spaces had slowly disappeared. In their place were lakes, blue skies, birdhouses, family dinners, and people smiling together. Emily remained an important part of Noah's life. Grace had become one of the most trusted leaders of the new foundation. And Sophie had become something nobody expected, the heart of the entire Carter family. On a bright spring morning, Ethan gathered everyone inside the grand hall of the estate. Noah sat beside Sophie. Grace and Emily exchanged curious glances. Several foundation employees stood nearby. Ethan stepped forward with a smile. "For years, I believed success meant building something people would remember," he said. "Then a little girl with a bottle of bubbles taught me that success is helping people feel seen." Sophie immediately blushed. Noah grinned. Ethan pulled away a large curtain. Behind it stood a display for the Blue Sky Foundation. The organization had already opened programs across several states, helping families support children facing emotional and sensory challenges. At the center of the logo floated a single blue bubble. Noah smiled the moment he saw it. Ethan looked at Grace. "This foundation would not exist without your courage." Then he turned to Sophie. "And it certainly would not exist without your kindness." He handed her an envelope. Sophie's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a full educational scholarship covering every stage of her future education, from middle school through university. Sophie stared at the paper in disbelief. Grace began crying immediately. Ethan shook his head gently. "This is not a reward. This is an investment in someone who changes lives." The room erupted into applause. But Noah quietly stood up and walked toward his father carrying something hidden behind his back. "I have one more thing," he said. Ethan smiled. "What is it?" Noah handed him a framed drawing. Everyone gathered closer. The picture showed Noah, Ethan, Sophie, Grace, Emily, and dozens of children standing beneath a bright blue sky, filled with bubbles. Ethan immediately noticed something important. The empty space was gone. He was finally standing beside his son. Tears filled his eyes. "It is finished," Noah said softly. Ethan smiled through the emotion. Then he noticed writing on the back of the frame. Small words written in careful handwriting. His hands began to shake as he turned it over. Two simple words stared back at him. "Daddy listened." Ethan could not speak. Those two words carried the weight of every mistake, every lesson, every second chance, and every promise finally kept. He pulled Noah into a hug while tears streamed down his face. Around them, nobody tried to hide their emotions. Even Sophie wiped away tears. Later that evening, Ethan and Noah visited the lobby of the Carter Grand Hotel, the same place where everything had started. Near the fountain, a young boy sat overwhelmed by the noise around him. His mother looked helpless. Ethan and Noah exchanged a glance. Neither needed to say a word. Noah reached into his pocket and pulled out a small yellow bottle, the same kind Sophie had carried that day. He handed it to his father. Ethan knelt beside the child and gently blew a stream of bubbles into the air. The boy looked up. The bubbles floated toward the glass ceiling. Slowly, the tension left his face. Noah smiled. Ethan smiled back. Above them, one bright blue bubble drifted higher and higher before disappearing into the sunlight. The bubble vanished, but the kindness that created it never did. Because sometimes the smallest act of compassion can heal a wounded heart. And sometimes the people who change the world arrive carrying nothing more than a bottle of bubbles, a willingness to listen, and the courage to care when nobody else does.